Hello and welcome to this week's MTD Podcast. We are proud to introduce Andy Soos from Bedford CNC. My name, though, first of all, and probably most importantly in my own mind, Colin Griffiths, MTD. I've been with the company now, 6 years of hell.
Too long.
Yeah, I heard that. But I'd like to say time-served engineer, but my background is finance, so I'm learning every day, both in finance and engineering, but it's been a fantastic journey. And part of that, I have to thank the boss, Paul Jones. Yes, Paul, MTD, been going to 2007, taking over the globe now in terms of engineering, and a huge amount that we're supplying. Well, we're providing marketing promotion to many OEMs, machine tool suppliers, and anything in the machine shop, basically.
Absolutely, and people are even buying machines because of seeing what we're doing, like this gentleman here.
Yes, we'll come to that in a minute. Don't keep your powder dry, as our cameraman Chris says. And the reason we are here is a time-served engineer, Mr. Andy Soos. The crowd go wild. Bedford CNC. He is definitely a time-served engineer, having served an apprentice. You served an apprenticeship even. Tell it, Andy. Let's crack on. Where did you start? What did you do?
WH Allen's in Bedford.
Right. Now, if anybody doesn't know that, what do they do there?
They manufactured pumps, turbines, and diesels.
Okay. And were they involved with Rolls-Royce at all?
They were bought out by Rolls-Royce, so it was became a Rolls-Royce subsidiary company. Yeah.
Okay. And what did you do there? Not a lot, I heard, but
I was an apprentice, and then once I finished my apprenticeship, I went on to the borers in the little jig house just by number 2 shop.
Okay. There's all sorts of gags
You
about.
would have been good on a borer.
Yeah. Why is that? Because I'm boring. I'm thinking more of my dancing skills of the jig. But so, what machines were you running?
It was a SIP, Swiss borer.
There's Paul having a little sip in the background, but that's another type. A Swiss borer. So what were you actually manufacturing on that?
We were doing all sorts for the turbines and the pumps, just anything really. It was a long time ago now, Colin.
Okay, well, so you must have started when you were at least, 5 maybe? Or
not as young as that, no.
This is not a visual program, so we're right on that one. And I heard a rumour though that you bumped into Paul at WH Allen. Is that correct?
No, because I was before Paul. I'm a class of 79, so that's a long time ago.
Class of 79.
Yeah.
And how many apprentices did they have in that year?
I think it was about 40. There was 79. There was 40. And we split into mechanical and technical, and it just depended on your school grades where you went. If you were good on the machines, you stayed on the machines.
So where did you come, Andy?
I came on the machines, mate. Yeah.
Now, this ties in nicely as well, Mr. Jones, because allegedly you've got an engineering background as well. Where did you work?
Well, I did my apprenticeship exactly the same as Andy at WH Allen, but I was the class of 1991. So I was 12 years behind, and actually it just shows the difference in the amount of apprentices they took on, because there was only about 7 in our year. So during that sort of 80s period, obviously they reduced quite a lot of the intake of apprentices, which was a shame. And I think even the year after mine, it was less than that.
Well, it's even less now, isn't it?
Well, actually, in recent years, it's kind of gone up.
No, it's only Allen's, because now it's
less at Allen's because it's not there anymore.
Exactly,
but,
it's a block of posh flats.
That's the reason why we've got a skill shortage now, because of in the 70s and early 80s, they were taking on. Each company was taking on so many apprenticeships, but now it just dwindled after that, and that's why we're in a position in engineering and manufacturing where there's a massive skills shortage, and we're just trying to scramble to close that gap a little bit.
Yep.
But I just can't see how it can be done.
But I think, value. Well, your opinion, Andy, probably not Paul's, but all the guys these days just want to get on the computers and CAD cams, and you've got a fantastic new machine which we'll come to in a minute. It is making engineering easier, I will say, but you still need to have those skills.
Yeah, it's easier for machining wise, because you've got the controls on the machines that are either conversational, or you've got, as you say, your CAD cam, but you still need to know the fundamentals of how to start a job, how to go about it, how to pick up a block of metal or plastic, and just have a look at it and look at the drawing and decide which way you're going to do it. Because if you start it wrong, you can end up either scrapping the job or making it so difficult that it's not cost effective.
It was always, I don't know when in your first year of the apprenticeship, when I was at Allen's, we didn't do the first year at Allen's. We did it actually not far from here, where you are now,
off the road.
At the Bedford Training Group, and that was where you started to establish these skills. I mean, they were just all conventional lathes, conventional milling machines. You were just given a block of material and told to make something, and I mean, there was good guidance, but it was also quite strict as well. And
how did you cope with that?
Well, it was a really good learning curve. It was a really good learning experience because I had no real. Well, I have to be honest. I had not really much interest in engineering before that. I was told by my dad, my mum and dad, to basically, if you're not happy at school, go and get a skill. Go and get a skill. And he was an engineer, and it was like, go try and get an engineering apprenticeship, which I did. And to this day, I obviously thank them for that input, because it is important to get a skill. But it was a hard first year. Yeah.
But those apprenticeships, I mean, people like Incom are doing that sort of thing now, though. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's very condensed. I find out our apprenticeships.
Yeah, I mean, when I left school and you had to sign indentures, and you got indentured as an apprentice.
I got indentures.
Yeah, I know. But I started in September, and the first couple of weeks was like a whirlwind because, as you say, Allen's had its own training school, training centre. It was above the blacksmith shop or the smithy shop down the far end, and you had to walk up the stairs, and you were split into groups. And if it wasn't right, your job, it was thrown in the bin. It's like you spent hours doing it. You thought it was great, but the instructors looked at it and threw it in the bin. You had to start again.
But did they give you guidance as to what was wrong, or they just don't know?
Oh yeah, they did. Yeah, and you went back and you corrected what you'd done, but you then spent sort of 6 weeks at a time in the different areas, in machining, fitting, which was filing and making sure things fitted together, or the smith shop. So the first year was done up there, and then the subsequent 3 years was done in your department where you were. So if you were good at machining, you went down into number one shop called White City, and you had a dedicated instructor there, and you were given production jobs.
So what like you mentioned this, I think you mentioned SIP6 earlier, but what machines were you sort of trained on?
We were trained on lathes, mills.
Yeah, but what type? I know that, Andy.
Oh, you took, Colin.
It was like Adcock and Shipleys and Colchesters and all the really.
There was no basics, CNC. It was all manual mills.
Yeah. But that's all the blast and the pass that we do when we're out and about. The old machines.
And I think that is one of the biggest factors in learning. When, like Andy said, when you get a part and you have to make it from start to finish manually, and that includes the measurement, the vernier calipers, the plug gauges, all of those fits. Whereas nowadays, it's stick it on a CMM, check it, and that tells you, even polish finishes using a bit of emery tape to get the finish. All these things,
scratching your nail across it to make sure that you got the right one, and then checking it on the surface block to make sure it's.
I'll tell you what, it's like standing opposite Waldorf and Statler here, chatting away about the old days.
I can't remember having a digital vernier when I was doing my apprenticeship. It was all a manual vernier, so you had to read the lines and get it right and things like that.
I mean, he uses them as a spanner.
That's what they are. So I'm going to ask you, what's your favourite machine at Allen's?
Favourite machine at Allen's? Oh, I don't know.
Coffee machine.
Yeah, probably was, because we used to queue up for that in the mornings, before we start. But yeah, there was no real favourite. It was just, you were just there to learn, and it's like, it's later in life when you find out what you really want to do, and what whether it's milling or turning.
But you do both. We'll come to Bedford CNC in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, then you're not sure about what you can't name specific machines. Now, WH Allen's has closed now.
Yes.
Not just because it's gone 5 o'clock, but because permanently. But what was the biggest disaster you've had there? Did you just do one job and think, oh, I've really cocked this up?
No.
That you can admit to as a time-served engineer.
Not really, because there was always a way around it. It was either
hide it.
Yeah. yeah. Slip it in the old batch. That'll do. Weren't mine. Done on another shift.
You've been going to Paul Jones School of Engineering, haven't you?
I tell you what, you say it's closed, and not just now, but permanently. I understand now, looking back, having sort of learnt through industry in the last sort of 2 decades, exactly why it shut, because it was the most unproductive company that you could ever come across. I mean, it really, really was. I'm
looking at you two right now. Is that a reason? Or
it's just astonishing when I look back now and think of how they used to measure times on jobs, what jobs you did next. There was no streamlining of processes. There was no, I don't know, the whole thing. There was waiting at stores for thing. I mean,
Not the long wait.
The long wait,
waiting the long wait. That was
Skyhook. It really was, to me, it was a classic educational facility that wasn't worthy of being a privately owned or a publicly owned company.
It was just,
and I mean that, and I don't mean that disrespectfully.
You could see that when you're working there, because you queue up, you have to log on the job, log off the job. That took time, and then you're always waiting around. Go to the stores, you've got to get your chitty, and it was just long-winded, and also there were old machines. There were. When I was there was very, very few. If there were NC tape machines, there was not any CNC machines when I was there. So,
and that's right. And I remember if you needed a program in a machine, you had to ring a guy up. And
for the programming office.
Programming office, and he might have been, in machine shop number 3, and he'd say, hey, I'll be there after lunch. And so what? That's 2.5 hours. Okay, so what am I going to do for 2.5 hours? I know what, I'll tidy the machine up, or sweep round.
But you logged off your job and logged on to waiting.
Yeah,
and that was it.
Yeah.
And then when
super efficient. Then.
But that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And as you say, engineering has moved on massively. It's a bit more, productive and more efficient. But when you look back and you reminisce,
those are the days. Paul, what about you? Any favourite moments, favourite machines?
I got so many. I have to say that I think it was one of the worst and the best times of my life working at that company for several reasons. Best because it really set a foundation for engineering as to what was going to become for my career. But worst, just I don't know. I wasn't interested when I was there sometimes, and I used to scrap things. And we talk about all the things that we talk about now. That there used to be people, I don't know, taking the mickey out of each other, and it was kind of fun at the same time. But
it was a family. When you went there, you had banter, you had laugh with each other. I remember. I organised, we as number 2 shop, we organised a day trip to Bruges on the bus.
Did you log out and then just log back in when you got back?
Do you know what I mean? The whole shop had a day off and went to Bruges on the bus.
This is the thing. I remember, and again, you talk about best and worst times. I think, as I say, it was a foundation for me. But worst times, I think things like I could. Looking back, I could not turn up for a week, and then when you turn up after a week, my foreman would say, "What happened last week?" So, I rang in sick last Monday. Oh, did you? We got no log of that. Yeah, and I hadn't, and you'd got to Wednesday and thought, "Shall I ring in now? I'll just wait now."
Too late now.
Too late now. I'll just turn up on Monday and say, and it's stuff like that was just incredible.
Wasn't part of your holiday sort of allowance, your sickness? You had to take at least. You had to take 2 weeks.
This thing around the shop that if you hadn't had 10 days a year off sick. You needed to use your 10 days a year. It's just unbelievable, isn't it? And I think that when I look back at it, I used to play football on night shifts, kicking the ball up and down the gangways.
Sleeping
on night shifts. Yeah, it was just...
the good old days of engineering.
But I did learn a lot. Worst things, I used to hate having to get there at 7:30 in the morning, and I used to be flying into the car park and running up to clock in, and you get 3 minutes a day, I think.
You do, yeah. If I remember, it's 3 minutes.
3 minutes a day. So if that, over the course of a week, if you went over your 21 minutes or whatever it was, then you lost an hour's pay or whatever. But things like that, and waiting at the end of the day, you wash up at 4 in the afternoon. You don't finish till 4:30. You clock out at 4:30. So at 4 o'clock, you go and wash your hands, you get ready. And then you're standing by the clocking machine at 28 minutes past 4, waiting for. It's you calculate all that.
Waiting for it to click over to 4:30, so you can.
And speeding out the car, put down the pub. Now I'm going to move us on because I'm sure I'm having a wry chuckle here. It is very entertaining. But another reason we're here, we're at Bedford CNC, is because you've moved a long way as well. Time served engineer.
Yeah.
We first met you 4 or 5 years ago. I'm going to have to mention it, the trusty old beaver, which has gone to the engineering heaven, I would say.
I would say so, yeah.
Absolutely. But things have moved on. You don't need your manual verniers and things like that. But you've got, the state-of-the-art DMG standing next to me right now. Well, I'm standing next to it. DMG Mori CMX 800V. What on earth does that mean to people out there?
It's a milling machine. It's 800 mil in X, 560 in Y, and 570 in Z. So it's a fairly big cube. of material that you can get on
Those
there.
measurements, that's not a cube, Andy. You're an engineer.
They're millimetres, yeah. Millimetres. So you get fair-sized jobs on there, or multiple jobs.
But just the change in technology from, the old, I don't know, Bridgeport mills and stuff like that.
Yeah, from when I started as an apprentice in '79 to now, technology's moved on massively. As we've touched on Allen's, it was tape machines.
They're plug board machines?
They had plug board machines, yeah, in the turning shop. And to now, what we're doing with CAD CAM and everything like that, because it was all old school. You wanted arcs and radiuses, it all had to be calculated out properly. And I think sometimes you lose that, but these machines now have got, with the controls, we've got the shop mill control on here, the Siemens 840D, and that's got trig and all sorts. You don't need a calculator.
I could see. I also spy your old Zeus book dating to 1980, which
Yes.
it's not even like Trigger's Broom. That is the original, isn't it?
It is the original, and it's got my name written in it in pen on one of the pages. So if anyone did nick it in them days, I could go and borrow it back.
Yeah. Actually, Paul dropped it in earlier, the thieving
I
science.
never used one.
That's why none of your jobs are right.
What is interesting is you're right, and I think this is the reason why engineering is now sexier than it was back in the 80s and 90s, because you go back to those times. We talk about where we worked at Allen's, and I remember there was a guy, and I mentioned this earlier, Robert Gray, I think his name was, and he used to just work on this lathe, and all day he would just stand there turning these parts, and it was just relentless from 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, well, till 4 o'clock, because he went and washed up and all the fag hanging out of his mouth, one after the other.
He could smoke in the machine shop. Good Lord.
That guy must have gone to bed at night thinking, I've got to get up and do that again all day tomorrow. I mean, it must have been so, I don't know, just an awful way of life almost.
No, some people love it though. That's
do you think maybe they do, but now it's not like that. You've got this fantastic control, touch screen, guidance. You've got all the tools that make engineering so much better, and I think that's where the division has come from and why we need to educate people. That this is
that
good
Robert
industry.
Gray with his fag in his mouth. He was an art. I mean, he was an artist. He was making each piece was probably a creation for him. And or it's just just an easy turn collar or something.
Far from exciting for me.
You are far from excited for me.
Yeah, this
absolutely.
is where we need to encourage youngsters, or even not youngsters, but sort of people that don't know what they want to do, get them into engineering. It's computers, it's CAD CAM, it's machining, it's technology. Some of the technology is up there right at the edge, and if you get different companies that have different jobs and they're doing different things, you can work in such a vast array of, from Formula One to aerospace down to just a job in whatever comes through the door. So there's a massive difference.
Just the parts you can make these days, just looking at that is just phenomenal. Some of the complexity.
I think what this pandemic has shown is that manufacturing hasn't stopped, and it can't stop because it's such a necessity, isn't it? To me, manufacturing is the only way, or one of the only ways, we're going to get out of this mess as a country, to make things to sell. And we, as a country, we've got some fantastic engineers, some fantastic companies out there that with machines like we've just got, but they're making parts that we can sell. And if you're not making parts, you're not selling them, you're not going to grow. And me personally, I think, looking back over my time as an engineer and as a machinist, the only way we're going to get out of a mess like we're in through this pandemic is to make things, is to make engineering sexier, if you want.
Absolutely.
More appealing to people. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or woman or whatever. Make it appealing to people out there to come and join. It's not as dirty as it was.
And that's where I
cleaner.
see a big difference. I totally agree. I think now that you look at it and you see these machines and what they make, and you look at them and they look good, and you see the metal flying off of them, and like you say, you're not going home like I used to with cast iron dust in my ears and up my nose and in my fingernails. It's totally different.
It's not only machines that have come on, it's the coolant and it's the other consumables around it that have made it as it is as well, because they all come as a package.
Well, so it's a whole package from the start, like from the initial supply, the software systems, because I know you've got PSL data track. Get in there, because that helps you run the whole machine shop pretty much.
Yeah.
So you've got your supply of your metals, your tooling, your software, your coolant, which are lubricants, and your swarf conveyor at the end, and your swarf management, the whole package, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I always remember going home from Allen, smelling of the old suds, as they used to call it, the white coolant. I mean, here we use semi-synthetic coolant, which doesn't smell, it doesn't go off. You have to manage it, but it's a lot more. It's a lot easier to manage than it was in the old days.
User friendly.
Yeah, user friendly. Yeah,
that's the one, guys. It's been a great trip down memory lane. Maybe not for me, but it's been very interesting finding out about WH Allen and the demise of, because solely down to you two and your engineering skills.
I don't think so.
I think there was lots of us, and I think that's. I just think that it was just the way it was in those days, and the company was very successful for many years, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Of engines and diesel engines around the world.
But it didn't move on from what you're saying.
It didn't. I just think it didn't move with the times.
Yep.
Not quickly enough, I don't think. I mean, it was taken over by Rolls-Royce, and they're a massive company, but. Yeah, maybe. But I mean, just aside, there's a WH Allen's Engineering Facebook page, which has got lots of history on there, which I've been looking at just lately and found all from my year as an apprentice, and probably Paul, you can look the same. But so if anyone out there wants to find out more about WH Allen's and the rise and fall of Henry Allen when he came to Bedford, it's all there on the website.
Were they big, just in this area, talking about this geographic area, were they a big supplier or big contractor of work to engineers, to smaller companies? Because I wonder whether that would have had an impact in the local areas as well.
We did an awful lot in house, didn't we? I don't know whether smaller parts went out, but I mean, you had number 1 shop, which was turning, number 2 shop, and then number 3 shop, which was heavy. So it may have been that, but yeah.
And you impressed with your new machine?
Certainly, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Guys, I am going to wrap up there because we've gone well over our allotted time of 3 minutes. Really have. But I think a couple of key things. You've got to move on with times. You've got to invest. You've got to keep ahead of the game. And there's lots of big packages out there in terms of not just your machine. Andy Soos, Bedford CNC. Great to have you on board. It really is fantastic.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Paul.
And Paul, thank you for imparting us with your wisdom. Is that manual one, all right?
That's got a digital readout.
That's it. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you very soon, or hear you very soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the MTD Podcast. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Find more episodes on mtdcnc.com.